I'll be speaking about various parts of the UN and how their responses to the Rohingya genocide and to other atrocities in Myanmar can be strengthened. I will also, as suggested, comment on how to build alliances better and what actually can we advocate for, what states can do and what NGOs can push for. So I'm going to start with a big overview of action to date by the UN. As we know, the UN is not one entity. Usually people talk about the UN as if it was just one organism, but it's actually a multitude of bodies. The UN Security Council often gets the most attention and arguably has the most powers, but we also know that there are serious limitations to the work of the Council, lack of support of certain members, including China, who often threatens to block any actions on the Council. I'll get back to the Council later and touch upon other bodies first. So the Human Rights Council has actually been instrumental when it comes to the UN response to Myanmar. As you know, the fact-finding mission was created by a mandate by the Human Rights Council. It was created to establish facts around the human rights violations by the military and security forces. And the mission released very important reports in this regard. Of course, it was a full account of violations by the military in Rakhine, Kachin, and Shan states. They covered the financial empire of the Myanmar military, the sexual and gender-based violence, and crucially, the fact-finding mission found that the security forces committed acts of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And importantly, that those crimes were ongoing at the time when the report was published last year. The Human Rights Council also continues to support such important mandates as the Special Rapporteur mandates on the human rights situation in Myanmar. Yang Yili was a very important voice on Myanmar for many years. Now we have Thomas Andrews, who's the new Special Rapporteur, and he already has made some important statements on Myanmar, including in regard to the upcoming election. The Human Rights Council also established the IAM, which is the investigative mechanism for Myanmar. We'll refer to it as IIMM. So those mechanisms are not only crucial in establishing facts, but also supporting accountability mechanism. You talked about in your previous panels about the ICJ case, and both FFM and IAM have been crucial in that regard, especially the FFM. The case has heavily relied on the FFM findings and actually enabled the Gambia, because of those conclusions, to take that case to the International Court of Justice. The other body I want to talk about is the General Assembly. So unlike the Security Council with the veto power, the GA includes all states and also has very important powers. So far they have requested the Secretary General to appoint a special envoy. They also provided funding for that position. The General Assembly also fully funded the IIMM mechanism. So that also was quite an important action, because as we know from other mechanisms, including a similar mechanism for Syria, where the funding was voluntary contributions, that really negatively impacted the ability of the mechanism to operate effectively. And as we know so far, the mechanism is operating right now, and they're able to share their files and their findings as requested by international courts, which will be crucial for ICC case that is ongoing, for ICJ case, and any other accountability initiatives in the future. So that brings us also to the role of the Secretary General when it comes to Myanmar and the Rohingya genocide, whose role should not be underestimated when we talk about different avenues for action at the UN. So the SG appointed a special envoy, as was mentioned. The SG also has the powers under Article 99 of the UN Charter, and those are to bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter which may threaten maintenance of international peace and security. And of course, Myanmar falls under that category. In fact, the Secretary General, exactly 3 years ago, almost now, it was in September 2017, shortly after the clearance operations began, in August of 2017, he sent a letter to the Security Council urging them to pay more attention to this situation. It was actually the first time the Secretary General has done something like that since the 80s. So there's a variety of responses at the UN's disposal to respond to mass atrocities. The Secretary General also commissioned the independent inquiry into Myanmar and how the UN was involved in the response to the situation there. So that became known as the Rosenthal Report. That report was released last year and found many systemic and structural shortcomings. So with all this multitude of action, unfortunately, where we see the situation is ongoing atrocities in Myanmar. The Rohingya still lack citizenship. There's no freedom of movement in their own country. They lack access to basic services. They don't have ability to vote, which is crucial ahead of the elections in November. So what can be done? Starting with the Secretary General. It's been 3 years, so I believe that the Secretary General should again use Article 99 once again and bring Myanmar to the attention of the Council, especially since the Council has not been very active on the situation in Myanmar. What else? The concerned members of the Council should request the SG to brief the Council in an open session. There have been a few meetings earlier this year, but none of them have been discussed openly. They were not public, and that does impact the level of the pressure that is being put on Myanmar. So members of the Council could request the Secretary General to brief the Council in an open session. It will be an opportunity to examine the situation there 3 years since the genocide began. We know that the Council meetings have a serious impact on the government, even though Security Council has not done a lot when it comes to resolutions or any other products that would impose sanctions or referral to the ICC. We do know that even by having a meeting, they have an impact. Every time the meeting is announced, there is reportedly a frenzied activity within Myanmar to kind of respond to those meetings. They often create commissions or announce directives before council meetings. And while those commissions are often meaningless, it does show us that the council attention to the matter really makes a difference. And council members should take advantage of that power and meet regularly in an open format on Myanmar to discuss it, even though a resolution might be not always possible for them to do. So in order for those meetings to take place, this is when we need to talk about coalitions and what can be done, right? So NGOs need to have constant advocacy ongoing with the pen holder, which is the United Kingdom, the pen holder on this issue on the council, but also with all elected members of the council, especially those from the Asia region and members of the OIC. The coalition of states also has to lobby these governments to do more. Currently, these members are Vietnam and Indonesia that are Asian members. They're also members of the ASEAN. Niger and Tunisia are members of the OIC. So these states need to be encouraged to do more on Myanmar during their time on the council. When it comes to General Assembly, they're about to start negotiating their annual resolution on Myanmar soon, which was usually negotiated and released in the fall and winter. So this is also an opportunity for all member states to endorse, again, the independent mechanism on Myanmar to ensure it will be funded to continue its operations. This resolution should also express explicit support for the ICJ case on Myanmar and ensure that Myanmar will comply with the provisional measures. The provisional measures ordered by the ICJ really present an opportunity to all UN bodies to re-engage on this file. So the Security Council has a role in ensuring that the provisional measures are implemented. The General Assembly has a role in ensuring the compliance, and the SG, all of these bodies can really examine that not enough is being done by Myanmar, which we know now is the case in addressing the root causes of the genocide, and really pressure on Myanmar to do so. And the more engagement there is, the better. So keeping that agenda alive is very important, even though sometimes it's difficult to have products. It's still important to keep it on the agenda to ensure that there's accountability if certain benchmarks are not met, that these different bodies have to really point to that. So the Security Council, for example, only issued one presidential statement on this in 2017. It is now time to look at those recommendations and really say that, well, none of the recommendations to Myanmar from 3 years ago were met, which means that we need to do more. And even if there is a threat of a veto, I think it is time to be a little more courageous and push members who are unwilling to have this move forward, if needed, to veto it. At least at that point, it will be clear to the world that these particular governments are propping and supporting a genocidal regime. So I think it's time for all member states to be active on this file, and for NGOs to really keep the pressure and engage with these member states to ensure all these different opportunities are taken up and acted upon.